The gavel slammed onto the town hall table, the sound echoing through the room like thunder before a storm. Hope Davis, a 62-year-old woman with gray hair pulled back in a loose bun and hands calloused from decades of planting beans, rose from her plastic chair with the dignity of a dethroned queen, her eyes brimming with tears, but her voice as firm as an oak tree. "You can take our land, but you can't take our memories." It was a Tuesday in March when the notice arrived. Hope was watering basil plants on the porch of the simple house where she was born, raised 3 children, and buried her husband 5 years prior, when the mailman delivered the sealed envelope bearing the town hall's insignia. Her hands trembled as she opened the official document outlining the expropriation of her property for the construction of a business complex. 48 hours. That's all the time she had left on the piece of land that held 70 years of her life. The house was on the last block of Acacia Street, a narrow road ending at a small square where a centuries-old fig tree stood. It was there that Hope had her first dates with John, her late husband, when they were teenagers, and the world seemed as endless as the blue sky above their small town. The 1,000-square-meter property housed not only the brick house, but also an organic garden that fed half the neighborhood, a coop where 10 free-range chickens pecked, and a small orchard with jabotica, Suriname cherry, and mango trees bearing fruit as sweet as honey. She told about the day she arrived on that land as a young wife, pregnant with her first child, with nothing but the dream of building a family. She spoke about the difficulties of the early years when John worked as a bricklayer and she sewed to supplement their income. She recounted how, little by little, they transformed a piece of arid land into a prosperous home, not only for them, but for the entire neighborhood. "You talk about progress," she said, her voice gaining strength. "But I ask, progress for whom? For what? What you call underutilized land, I call a full life. What you see as square meters, I see as history, memory, community." She explained how the community garden not only fed bodies, but nourished souls, created bonds, and taught children about responsibility and respect for nature. The most moving moment of her speech was when she spoke about John. "My husband is no longer here with me, but his presence lives in every plant he helped care for, in every fruit that still grows from the trees he planted. If you take me from this land, you will not only be destroying a house, you will be destroying a part of me that cannot be rebuilt elsewhere." When she finished her speech, the room fell silent for a few seconds. Then a spontaneous round of applause filled the room. Many people were visibly moved. The mayor, clearly touched by the speech, thanked both parties and said that the decision would be made after careful analysis of all aspects involved. In the following days, the pressure on the mayor intensified. Ricardo Mendez scheduled private meetings, reinforcing the economic benefits of the project and suggesting that the city might be missing a unique development opportunity. His lawyers reminded him that the expropriation process had already been approved and that any delay could generate additional costs for the municipality. More importantly, the study revealed that Hope's project had inspired similar initiatives in 12 neighborhoods of the city, creating a network of urban farming that directly benefited more than 300 families. The document concluded that the destruction of Hope's Garden would represent not only an environmental loss, but the risk of dismantling an entire sustainability network that had developed organically over the years. Ricardo Mendez challenged the study, arguing that environmental benefits could not be compared to concrete economic benefits. His project, he claimed, would generate 50 direct and 120 indirect jobs, in addition to significantly increasing municipal revenue. He hired a consulting firm to prepare a counter-study focusing on the economic aspects and the feasibility of relocating urban farming activities to another location. The technical battle intensified. Environmentalists brought in sustainable development experts who argued about the importance of preserving authentic community initiatives. Economists hired by the construction company presented data on economic growth and urban development. The local press covered every development, and public opinion was divided between those who prioritized economic progress and those who defended the preservation of the traditional community. Amidst this war of studies and arguments, Hope continued her daily routine. She rose before the sun to water the plants, feed the chickens, and prepare breakfast. She received neighbors who came to get seedlings or gardening advice. In the afternoons, she sat on the porch to sew or simply watch the street traffic. Apparently calm, but inside she felt the weight of the responsibility she had unwittingly assumed. One morning, while picking tomatoes for lunch, Hope received an unexpected visitor. Ricardo Mendez arrived alone, without lawyers or advisors, driving his own imported car. He was wearing jeans and a simple dress shirt, a clear attempt to appear more approachable. Hope received him with the same courtesy as always, offering coffee and cookies. "Miss Hope," Ricardo began, accepting the cup of coffee, "I would like to propose a solution that benefits everyone." His proposal was ambitious. The construction company would finance the creation of a 10,000 square meter public park in another neighborhood, with community gardens, an environmental education center, and spaces for cultural activities. Hope would be hired as a consultant for the project, with a monthly salary and total autonomy to develop the activities she considered important. The offer was generous, but Hope shook her head slowly. "Mr. Mendez," she said, placing her cup on the table, "you still don't understand. It's not about size or resources, it's about roots. You can't transplant a century-old tree and expect it to flourish the same way. Some things need to grow naturally, in their place of origin." Ricardo insisted, increasing the financial offer and detailing the benefits of the new project. He spoke of modern facilities, automated irrigation systems, climate-controlled greenhouses. He promised the park would be a model of urban sustainability nationally recognized. But Hope remained firm in her position. "Young man, you want to build something artificial to replace something born from the heart. It's not the same." Frustrated, Ricardo left a business card and asked her to consider the proposal. "Hope," he said before leaving, "you're missing an opportunity to multiply your work. Think of the people who could benefit on a much larger scale." Hope tucked the card into her apron pocket and replied, "Mr. Mendez, multiplying isn't always better. Sometimes it's better to cultivate carefully than to spread without love." That night, Hope talked at length with Celia about the proposal. The two friends sat on the porch, watching the stars shine over the city. "Am I being selfish?" Hope asked. "Am I preventing something that could benefit more people?" Celia, always practical and direct, replied, "Hope, you've spent your whole life taking care of others. Now it's time to take care of what you've built. It's not selfishness, it's self-love." The last few days before the final decision were tense. Hope knew the deadline was approaching and that, regardless of popular mobilization, the law was on the developer's side. She spent more time in the garden, as if she wanted to absorb every moment in that space that had been her refuge for so many years. She observed the plants with special attention, noticing details that had previously gone unnoticed. The way the morning light fell on the lettuce leaves, the sound of water dripping from the homemade irrigation system, the buzzing of the bees that came to collect nectar from the basil flowers. The final decision would be announced on a Monday. The previous Friday, Hope woke up with a strange sense of peace. She had slept soundly for the first time in weeks and had dreamt of John. In the dream, he was working in the garden, as he had done in the last years of his life, and simply said, "Hope, you've planted everything you needed to plant. Now it's time to trust that the seeds will sprout." Over the weekend, Hope's house became an informal meeting point. Neighbors came to chat, children played in the yard, people brought food to share. It was as if everyone sensed that these could be the last moments of that little paradise. Celia organized a barbecue on Sunday, gathering more than 40 people in Hope's backyard. It wasn't a farewell, but a celebration of the community that had formed there. On Monday morning, Hope put on her best dress, the same one she had worn to her youngest daughter's wedding, and walked slowly to City Hall. She wasn't alone. At least 50 people accompanied her, forming a silent procession through the city streets. They carried flowers, seedlings, and signs with messages of support. They didn't shout or protest, they simply walked in solidarity, offering their presence as a form of support. The meeting took place in the mayor's office. Hope was invited in, along with 2 neighbors as witnesses. Ricardo Mendez was already there, sitting in a leather armchair, leafing through papers. Mayor Unspecified was visibly nervous, fiddling with pens on the desk and avoiding direct eye contact. "Hope," the mayor began, "this has been one of the most difficult decisions of my political career. I know there are important values at stake on both sides." He paused, took a deep breath, and continued. "After analyzing all the legal, economic, social, and environmental aspects, we have reached a conclusion." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Hope felt her heart race, but maintained a serene expression. Ricardo Mendez straightened in his armchair, preparing to hear the confirmation of what he considered inevitable. "We have decided," the mayor said, "that the expropriation process will be canceled." The statement fell like a bomb in the silence of the room. Ricardo Mendez stood up abruptly, questioning the legality of the decision. The mayor explained that, after further legal consultation, it was discovered that the area of Acacia Street was not actually included in the commercial expansion zone of the city's master plan. It had been a misinterpretation by municipal technicians. In addition, the social and environmental value of the urban farming project, documented by the university study, justified the preservation of the site as an area of public interest. Hope felt her legs weaken. Celia, who was beside her, held her arm to support her. The tears she had held back for months finally welled up, but they were tears of relief and gratitude. Ricardo Mendez, visibly irritated, announced that he would appeal the decision, but his lawyers had already explained to him that the chances of success were minimal. The news spread quickly through the city. When Hope left City Hall, a crowd was waiting for her in the street. Applause, hugs, and flowers were spontaneously offered. Children ran around her, shouting with joy. Adults cried with emotion. It was a genuine celebration of the community's victory over purely economic interests. In the following months, Hope's story gained national attention. Newspapers in major cities published articles about the case, presenting it as an example of community resistance and urban farming. A publisher from Chicago proposed that she write a book about her experiences, but Hope politely declined. "I don't know how to write books. I know how to plant stories." Ricardo Mendez Development Company found another site for their project, a disused industrial area that truly needed revitalization. Ironically, months later, the businessman sought Hope's advice on incorporating green and sustainable spaces into his developments. She welcomed him with her usual courtesy, offering coffee and engaging in a lengthy conversation about sustainable urban development. The Acacia Street Urban Farming Project officially became a city program, receiving small funding for expansion and maintenance. Hope was appointed voluntary coordinator, a position she accepted on the condition that the project retained its community-based and artisanal character. She didn't want excessive bureaucracy or institutionalization. She wanted it to remain what it always had been, an initiative born from the heart and sustained by love. 2 years later, Hope's Garden had multiplied across 23 neighborhoods in the city. Each maintained its own unique character, adapting to local needs and possibilities. There were groups focused on medicinal plants, others on vegetables, some specializing in composting, others in environmental education for children. All connected by the simple philosophy Hope always preached: planting is an act of faith in the future. The house on Acacia Street remained the center of it all. Every Tuesday, the women's group gathered to exchange seedlings and experiences. On Saturdays, children came to learn about cultivation and the environment. Sundays were reserved for workshops open to the community. Hope, now 64, continued waking before sunrise to tend to the plants, feed the chickens, and prepare coffee for anyone who arrived. One autumn morning, while harvesting basil blossoms for tea, Hope reflected on all that had happened. She remembered the words from her dream with John. "You've planted all you need to plant. Now it's time to trust that the seeds will sprout." She looked around and saw that the seeds had indeed sprouted, not just in the earth, but in the hearts of people. The century-old fig tree in the square continued to provide generous shade, its deep roots supporting the leafy crown that sheltered birds and offered coolness to passers-by. Like the tree, Hope had put down deep roots in that piece of land, creating a support network that extended far beyond what the eye could see. Her seeds of hope had spread throughout the city, sprouting in backyards, balconies, vacant lots, transforming into food, medicine, beauty, and above all, human connection. That morning, as the rising sun gilded the leaves of her garden, Hope smiled. She knew she had won not a battle, but a silent war against forgetfulness, against haste, against the idea that progress necessarily meant destruction. 5 years had passed since that transformative Monday. Acacia Street had become an unexpected tourist destination, visited by students, researchers, and curious individuals who came to see the urban farming project that had resisted real estate development. Hope received these visits with patience and simplicity, always offering coffee and explaining that there were no secrets or magic formulas, only love for the land and for people. Her story had inspired documentaries, academic papers, and even a play staged by the local cultural group. But none of this changed her essential routine: waking up early, tending the plants, chatting with neighbors, teaching children, preparing homemade remedies with medicinal herbs, and offering her porch as a refuge for anyone needing a word of comfort. Hope's children, who had initially worried about the exposure and pressure their mother had faced, now felt proud of her courage. They visited more frequently, bringing their grandchildren to learn about plants and hear stories from their grandmother. The house remained simple, but it was always full of life, laughter, and the aroma of fresh coffee that never ran out. Ricardo Mendez, curiously, had become one of the city's biggest advocates for urban farming. His development company began incorporating green spaces into all new projects, hiring consultants specializing in sustainability. He visited Hope regularly, no longer as an adversary, but as someone who had learned that not everything of value can be measured in square footage or monetary figures. "Hope," he said on one of these visits, "you taught me that there are 2 types of development: that which destroys to build, and that which builds while preserving. I've learned that the second is more difficult but infinitely more rewarding." Hope listened attentively, serving him a glass of jabuticaba juice made from fruit from her own tree. "Hope," she replied, "we can all learn and change. The important thing is that you discovered that true prosperity doesn't come from how much we earn, but from how much we contribute so that others can also prosper." Their conversation had become a powerful symbol in the city: the possibility of dialogue between differing viewpoints, transformation through genuine encounters between people who initially seemed to be on opposite sides. Teachers used this story in classes on conflict resolution, mediation, and sustainable development. Mayor's name, unspecified, who had made the final decision to cancel the expropriation, was re-elected by a wide margin. He created a municipal urban farming program inspired by Hope's model, allocating small funds to support similar community initiatives. It wasn't much money, but enough to buy seeds, basic tools, and composting materials. Celia, now 72, remained Hope's best friend and right-hand woman. Her plants had spread throughout the backyard, creating a small garden that rivaled her neighbors in beauty. The two women spent entire afternoons chatting about plants, children, grandchildren, and the life they had built together on that special street. Anthony had become a specialist in medicinal plants, studying old books and consulting traditional herbalists to learn about the healing properties of plants. His backyard became a reference point for those seeking natural remedies, and he distributed seedlings and knowledge freely to anyone who needed it. Maria, a single mother who participated in the mobilization, managed to earn a little extra income selling organic vegetables at the local farmers market. Her children, now teenagers, had grown up helping in the garden and developed an environmental awareness that they took to school, influencing classmates and teachers. The urban farming network had expanded to other cities in the region. Hope received invitations for lectures and meetings but preferred people to come to her house. "I'm not a good public speaker," she said, "but I'm good at heart-to-heart conversations, right here in my backyard." One morning, while watering the basil plants that had started the whole adventure, Hope felt a familiar presence. It wasn't anything supernatural, just the feeling that John was there, proudly watching everything she had built. She smiled and murmured, "We did it, John. We managed to plant hope." The fig tree in the park continued to grow, its roots ever deeper, its canopy ever more lush. Like the tree, Hope's project had taken root, sustaining not only plants but a new way of community living, where caring for the land became caring for people, where resistance didn't mean fighting, but simply continuing to plant. On that golden morning, with the aroma of fresh coffee mingling with the scent of flowers, Hope understood that her victory hadn't been to stop a construction, but to build something far more lasting. A community based on love, mutual care, and the certainty that when we plant with dedication, we always reap hope. The free-range chickens pecked freely in the backyard, the bees buzzed among the flowers, and the world kept turning. But there, on Acacia Street, time seemed to have found its perfect rhythm. Not too fast, not too slow, just the time needed for life to flourish in all its fullness.